Gitanjali.
Thank you, sir. So my talk today is on the recent advances in corneal collagen cross-linking. I have no financial disclosure. Now we're all aware that CXL is the preferred modality of treatment for corneal ectasia, both idiopathic as well as iatrogenic. Since its inception in the late 90s, our understanding of the disease process has evolved and various advancements have been seen in the field of cross-linking. I'll be covering my topic under 4 broad subcategories. I'll begin with the accelerated cross-linking, moving on to customized cross-linking both for keratoconus and low myopia, and if time permits, cross-linking in thin corneas. The standard Dresden protocol entails an epi-off approach with a 20-minute riboflavin pre-soak and a UV irradiation for 30 minutes. Now, although the procedure works very well, one of the significant shortcomings here is a prolonged treatment duration. Thus came the concept of accelerated cross-linking. This is based on the Bunsen-Roscoe law, which essentially states that the photochemical effect, which is cross-linking in this case, will be similar as long as the total fluence delivered remains constant. So essentially this means that whether you use a lower power for longer times or vice versa, as long as you're delivering a 5.4 joule per centimeter square fluence, the total effect should remain the same. So this was studied, but while comparing the outcomes of the accelerated protocols with the conventional cross-linking, they noted that the arrest in the progression of the disease was similar. However, in terms of the keratometry, maximum flattening was observed with the 3 milliwatts, and there was a progressive decrease as we went on to the 9, 18 and the 30 group. The demarcation line, which is essentially a surrogate for measuring the extent of cross-linking, was the deepest in the 3 and the 9 milliwatt and became patchy and shallower with the faster protocols. So what is the rationale behind this? Now, how does the cross-linking process occur? You have a riboflavin, which is activated via UVA irradiation, which produces reactive oxygen species and forms bonds between the collagen. This occurs in 2 pathways. You have a slower pathway, which is oxygen independent, and the faster major pathway, which depends on oxygen. So in the accelerated approach, even though the total fluence delivered is exactly the same, the faster protocols do not provide adequate time for the oxygen to be replenished, which is the likely mechanism for the decrease in the efficacy. Then evolved the concept of pulse cross-linking, wherein the UV irradiation is essentially provided intermittently. For example, a 1 second on and a 1 second off protocol. This gives time for the oxygen to get replenished. There was a pilot study which compared the results of continuous accelerated versus a pulsed approach. Though the safety of both of them was the same, there was a deeper demarcation line and a greater flattening which was observed in the pulsed group. However, an important thing that one needs to remember is that in experimental studies, it has been observed that though it only takes 2 seconds for the oxygen to be used up, it takes over a minute for it to be replenished. So whether a 1 second on and a 1 second off is truly a superior protocol is a question that still remains unanswered. We'll move on to the next part, which is customized cross-linking. So why customized cross-linking? Keratoconus, as we all know, is a focal corneal weakness, but when you cross-link a cornea, you provide a global stiffening. So would delivering a greater cross-linking over the actual weak area of the cone give you better results? So this was a study by Cynthia Robert which beautifully demonstrates that keratoconus is a focal disease wherein there is a focal point of weakness which under the IOP cannot hold its place and results in an increase in the curvature with subsequent thinning. This was also shown in vivo using the brilliant microscopy where you can see that the area of the cone is far weaker, but in the same keratoconic eye, the area outside the cone almost closely resembles a non-ectatic eye. Another landmark study was a finite element analysis which demonstrated that when we use smaller diameters, higher fluences just on the cone, the flattening that is induced is more as compared to a standard broad beam. This led to the evolution of customized cross-linking, which is now possible with the KXL2 system by the Avedro. So this essentially helps you to customize the amount of fluence you're delivering in smaller diameters. It can be done either in sectors, in circles, in arcs, or even on freehand. An important aspect is to determine the localization of this irradiation. In the previous studies, it was done on the area of the greatest curvature or the thinnest pachymetry. However, doing it on the maximum point of force TF dot elevation would be more intuitive, because both pachymetry and the anterior corneal curvature are modulated by the epithelial thickness and the tear film. So the machine essentially allows you to make as many circles as you want. We generally use 3, wherein you have the maximum fluence of 15 joules in the area corresponding to the point of elevation. Subsequently moves on to 10 and 5.4 joules. So how are the results thus far? We've seen promising results in multiple publications wherein there was a greater flattening in keratometry in comparison to the traditional protocols, which essentially resulted in greater gain in corrected distance visual acuity with spectacles. These are our cases where you can see there is a gross iris asymmetry of more than 7 diopters, and post cross-linking alone, this iris asymmetry has come down drastically with an increase in the best quality of vision. This is another case wherein the cone has, wherein the curvature has completely flattened and has become regularized. Now this is a 1-month post-operative ASOCT which demonstrates the different levels of demarcation line. You can see a deeper demarcation line in the center corresponding to the higher fluence, and when you move in the periphery you have the 10 and the 5.4 joule areas. The safety was similar and there was no significant endothelial counts even though higher fluence was delivered. The haze formation was comparable to standard cross-linking. The next aspect I'd like to cover is the use of cross-linking for non-ectatic eyes for the correction of low myopia, which is known as pixel. Now, as I've already alluded to, corneal cross-linking can result in a flattening, which is better if the cone is more localized. So if we extrapolate the same thing to non-ectatic eyes and we produce a localized strengthening, it would result in a subsequent flattening and a myopic correction. This is the rationale for pixel. The indications remain the same as normal laser vision correction, but as of now we limit the correction to about 2 diopters because we can only target low myopias with negligible cylinders as of now. The contraindications are similar to that of traditional cross-linking. However, patients who have squint, nystagmus, or other conditions which would preclude a steady fixation are excluded. So again, this is done with the KXL2 or the Avedro, wherein you can see a small 4 mm central beam of irradiation is used. Another important addition in this machine is the presence of an eye tracking mechanism. You can note that this is an integrated pupil tracking technology which will help to maintain the centration of the pupil throughout, and the treatment is delivered exactly where intended. So how are the results thus far? There has been a low myopia reduction, and the epi-off approach produces better change in MRSE and more flattening as compared to the transepithelial protocol. So the concept again remains the same. As long as the epithelium is on, the amount of oxygen to the anterior stroma is limited, thereby limiting the efficiency. So the way forward was, the question that we asked was, would supplementing oxygen to an epi-on approach actually make better results? We studied this using a transepithelial protocol with a 10-minute riboflavin soak. This was then followed by an accelerated UVA irradiation in a pulsed fashion in the central 4 mm zone. This mask that you see here is essentially to provide oxygen during the UVA irradiation and have a concentration of more than 95% throughout. So we studied this in 50 eyes over a minimum follow-up period of 1 year. You can see the refractive outcomes over time, wherein there has been a significant improvement in the uncorrected distance vision from 0.63 to 0.13 logmar with a reduction in sphere and cylinder. Keratometric flattening was similar. It was significant over time. There was a small regression between the 3-month and the 12-month, but that was not significant. So this is a typical example. You can see a well circumscribed flattening in the center zone, and the patient had a correction of 1.25 diopters. So this essentially results in a greater percentage of the time during the day without glasses. Now, when you compare it to the earlier protocols, including the epi-off approach, the change in MRSE and the flattening was higher because of oxygen supplementation. I'll just move on to cross-linking for thin corneas. So we all know that the standard Dresden protocol mandates that the corneal thickness should be 400 microns following epithelial debridement. This is essentially done to limit the UVA irradiation at the level of the endothelium to 0.18, which is at least a factor of 2 larger than the damage threshold. The problem in countries such as ours is that the patients more often present at a very advanced stage of the disease, where the corneas are thinner than what are the cutoffs, making them not amenable for the traditional approach. Hence, a number of different protocols have evolved for cross-linking in thin corneas. Hypoosmolar riboflavin essentially entails the installation of hypotonic riboflavin to increase the intraoperative thickness. We use NaCl instead of dextran. However, the efficacy is limited because a swollen cornea does not behave the same as a normal cornea. The collagen now is more further apart and it is harder to form the crosslinks between. Also, the concentration of riboflavin in a swollen up cornea is obviously lower. Transepithelial CXL was also tried, wherein the epithelial was left intact just to give you an added advantage of the 50 microns. The efficacy remains controversial. This is essentially because of two reasons. Both the penetration of riboflavin and the oxygen in the anterior stroma would be limited. There was a landmark study by Sotes which showed that 23% of the eyes in the transepithelial group continued to progress as against none in the epi-off approach. Contact lens assisted CXL was demonstrated by Dr. Susan Jacob from India, wherein she uses a contact lens to intraoperatively augment the stromal thickness by about 100 microns. So some of the limitations were that the thickness could not be customized and the absorptive properties of the contact lens are not the same as the underlying stroma. We overcame these limitations by demonstrating the use of the stromal lenticule from SMILE for the purpose of intraoperative augmentation. So this is a small video which shows that following the epithelial debridement, the remaining stromal bed is measured to determine the thickness of the lenticule. The lenticule here is obtained from patients undergoing SMILE. The important thing to remember here is that the lenticule that is procured is thickest in the center and thinner peripherally. So you place it in a way that the thickest part of the lenticule corresponds to the thinnest area of the cone, and an augmented pachymetry of more than 400 microns is seen. The remaining cross-linking is carried out in a routine fashion. The lenticule, as against the contact lens, is well adherent to the underlying surface throughout the procedure. This is followed by a thorough wash with a contact lens placement. Iontophoresis in riboflavin we had stopped using that in the middle, but however newer reports have shown that it is working well. I'll just end with the last and the newest concept of cross-linking, which is adaptive fluence. Now there are three factors in cross-linking mechanism. One is the corneal thickness, the other is the riboflavin concentration, and the third is the UV intensity. In all the techniques that have been described thus far, either the corneal thickness has been increased or the riboflavin concentration has been altered, but the total fluence remains the same, which is 5.4 joules per centimeter square. So why not just customize this fluence? There are studies underway by Sabin Kling and co-workers wherein they are determining the duration of the UVA irradiation in order to customize the fluence now for a specific corneal thickness. So I'd just like to conclude with a better understanding of the disease process. We can have tailor-made approaches for the various stages and deliver optimal outcomes.